Deep dive. Today we're tackling a subject that probably feels pretty familiar if you've paid any attention at all to the Horn of Africa over the last decade.
Oh, for sure.
We're talking about Turkey's role in Somalia, but we're going to look at it through a lens that just completely flips the script.
Yeah.
Because usually that story is told one way. It's the story of the humanitarian superpower.
It's a very consistent brand. I mean, you have the Turkish Airlines flights landing in Mogadishu when no other major carrier would even touch the tarmac.
Right.
You have the hospitals they built, the schools, the road networks. The narrative has always been that Turkey is the big brother who stepped in when the West had basically given up.
And the central pillar of that entire brand, the slogan you hear at every single diplomatic press conference, is unity. Turkey is there to support the unity of Somalia. It sounds unimpeachable. I mean, who goes on record saying they're, pro-fragmentation?
It's the ultimate diplomatic safe harbor. But that is exactly why the document we're looking at today is so explosive. It's titled Turkey Unity Narrative in Somalia, a Diplomatic Cover Story.
Wow.
And the author isn't just suggesting that this unity talk is a bit optimistic. No, they're arguing it's a calculated diplomatic weapon.
So the premise here is that, okay, if you look at the public speeches, it's all altruism and brotherhood.
All of it.
But if you can get access to the closed-door conversations, specifically the ones about Somaliland, the mask comes off. The source suggests we aren't dealing with an honest broker.
Not at all. We're dealing with a strategic manipulator, someone protecting their own interests above all else.
And this isn't based on speculation, right? Or some anonymous whispers.
No, and that's the key. The whole analysis centers on a very specific primary source account from the man who basically designed modern Turkish foreign policy, Ahmet Davutoglu.
The former foreign minister, then prime minister. The strategic depth guy.
The very same. And the document dissects an account Davutoglu gave about his own actions, and it reveals that unity might just be a code word for control.
Okay, so let's set the stage. To understand this cover story, as the source calls it, we have to go back to 2012.
The London Summit on Somalia.
I remember this period. Somalia was trying to transition out of this really, really chaotic era, and the international community was all gathered to figure out a permanent roadmap forward.
It was a pivotal moment. But according to the account in our source, the vibe in London wasn't just about photo ops and handshakes. There was some serious tension.
How so?
Davutoglu claims that the host nation, the United Kingdom, was making a very aggressive, very quiet push behind the scenes to literally change the map of the Horn of Africa.
The source says the UK was lobbying African and European diplomats to recognize Somaliland as an independent state. Now, hold on, before we get to the reaction, we have to give some context for why the British would even do that.
Absolutely.
Because in 2012, the difference between Mogadishu and Hargeisa, that's the capital of Somaliland, it was night and day.
It's crucial context. Somaliland declared independence way back in 1991. And while the South just descended into warlordism, terrorism, piracy,
Total chaos.
Somaliland built a functioning state from the ground up. By 2012, they had their own currency, a police force that actually kept order, and most importantly, they'd held multiple democratic elections.
So the UK diplomats are looking at this, and they're just thinking pragmatically. You've got one part of the country that actually works and another part that's basically a failed state. The British logic seems to have been, why are we holding the successful part hostage to the chaotic part?
Let's just recognize reality.
Precisely. It was a move to reward stability. But, in the world of international diplomacy, redefining borders is the ultimate taboo.
The biggest one.
And yet, Davutoglu says the UK was ready to break it. They were actually gathering momentum. And this is where that whole unity narrative faces its first real stress test. If Turkey is truly there to help Somalis, you'd think they might be open to, discussing what the people in Somaliland actually want.
Or at least engage in a debate about self-determination.
Right.
But that is not what happened. Davutoglu admits that he personally intervened. And he didn't just, vote against it. He launched a full-on diplomatic counteroffensive. He describes practically cornering the British Foreign Secretary at the time, William Hague.
I want to read the quote, the source attributes to Davutoglu here, because it's just a masterclass in rhetorical framing. He tells Hague, "We are bringing stability to Somalia. You are trying to divide it."
It's brilliant, isn't it? He casts the UK, the former colonial power, as the divider, the imperialist meddler.
And he positions Turkey as the protector.
Exactly. It just shuts down the moral argument immediately.
But the source argues that wasn't even the real checkmate. That moral argument was just the jab. The knockout punch was a specific geopolitical ultimatum that had absolutely nothing to do with Somalia.
This is the Northern Cyprus Gambit. And this is where the deep dive gets really, really interesting.
Davutoglu reportedly tells the UK, if you are so focused on recognizing a state, first recognize the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, then we can talk about Somaliland.
It's a jaw-dropping pivot, just stunning.
We have to unpack this for you because if you don't follow Mediterranean politics, this might sound like a completely random comparison. But Northern Cyprus is, well, it's essentially Turkey's Achilles heel in international relations, isn't it?
Oh, it's the frozen conflict that defines their entire relationship with Europe. Northern Cyprus exists as a breakaway state solely because of a Turkish military intervention in 1974. And here's the key part. It is recognized by exactly one country on Earth.
Turkey.
Just Turkey. The UN, the EU, the UK, everyone else considers it occupied territory.
So by bringing this up, Davutoglu is comparing Somaliland, which is this grassroots indigenous independence movement that rose from the ashes of a civil war, to Northern Cyprus, which most of the world views as a proxy state propped up by foreign troops.
The comparison is, it's legally and historically flawed, but strategically, it's genius. He knows the UK cannot possibly recognize Northern Cyprus. It would violate UN resolutions. It would destroy their relationship with Greece and the EU. It would completely upend NATO.
So he's holding Somaliland hostage. He's saying the price of admission for Somaliland is you accepting our occupation of Cyprus.
And since he knows the British won't pay that price, well, the conversation's over. The source argues this proves pretty definitively that Turkey's stance wasn't about Somali unity or what was best for the people there.
It was about preventing a precedent.
Exactly. That's the cover story part. The fear wasn't that Somaliland independence would hurt Somalia. The fear was that recognizing a breakaway state in Africa would weaken Turkey's arguments against other breakaway states, maybe closer to home.
The message to the international community was crystal clear. Somaliland recognition is a red line for Ankara.
Not because of Mogadishu, but because of Ankara.
This just completely reframes the whole concept of them being a neutral partner. You hear that term all the time, the honest broker.
But an honest broker is like a referee,
Right.
They facilitate a solution between two parties. Davutoglu's own account shows he wasn't a referee, he was a goalie. He was actively blocking one team from even getting a shot.
So they chose a side. They saw the Somali federal government in Mogadishu as the only legitimate actor, and Somaliland not as a political reality to be respected, but as
a problem to contain.
Yeah.
That's a phrase from the source that is so telling.
It really is.
If you view a people's desire for self-determination as just a nuisance that needs to be suppressed, you aren't supporting them. You are engaging in what the source calls strategic interference.
The document uses an analogy that I found really helpful. It compares it to a friend trying to solve a family dispute.
Right. So imagine two brothers who just cannot live together anymore. One has moved out. He's built his own house. He's doing great. The friend comes along and says, hey, I'm here to fix the family. But then he secretly locks the successful brother back in the old crumbling house and tells all the neighbors, see, I'm keeping them together.
And the twist is the friend is only doing it because he's terrified his own brother might get ideas about moving out of his house back home.
Exactly that. He's not managing the family for their benefit. He's managing them to validate his own worldview.
Which brings us to the next part of the timeline. Because after blocking recognition in 2012, Turkey didn't just walk away. They initiated the famous Ankara meetings,
which were a huge diplomatic theater, just massive.
I remember the headlines. Historic talks between Somalia and Somaliland. Turkey brings the brothers to the table. It seems so contradictory. If they were so dead set against Somaliland, why on earth would they host the talks?
This is where the source really advises us to be very cynical about diplomatic processes. If we accept the London Summit account, that Turkey had already decided Somaliland could never be recognized, then what was the point of the talks?
It's a negotiation where the outcome is already decided.
The source calls it diplomatic management. If you are the mediator, but you have already ruled out the one single thing the other side wants most, sovereignty, then you aren't offering a negotiation. You're just offering a holding pattern.
It's gatekeeping.
It is. By moving the talks to Ankara, Turkey controlled the whole environment. They controlled the agenda. And the source argues that the goal was never to solve the issue, but to keep Somaliland trapped in a loop of endless dialogue.
Because that keeps them from seeking recognition anywhere else. The rest of the world just says,
Wait, they're talking in Ankara. Let's just see how that plays out. It sucks all the oxygen out of the room. It's the illusion of progress being used to cement the status quo.
And that status quo is unity, or at least the map looking the way Ankara needs it to look.
Exactly.
The document refers to this as the two-faced policy. It's a very strong accusation, but when you lay out the public versus the private behavior, it's pretty hard to argue against.
Well, on the public stage, you get the language of love and brotherhood. We respect sovereignty. We are here for stability. It's all very emotional, very connected to this narrative of Islamic solidarity.
And in private.
In private, it's just hard-nosed realpolitik. It's using the Cyprus issue as a bludgeon. It's bullying European powers to back off. It's deciding for Somalis which of them get a voice and which ones don't.
It really hammers home that narrative control was the primary objective all along. They used the language of unity to justify their pursuit of influence.
And that influence required the suppression of Somaliland. Because think about it, if Somaliland succeeds, if they actually get international recognition, the entire Turkish narrative of being the savior of a unified Somalia just collapses.
And more dangerously for them, the precedent is set.
Exactly.
It's just fascinating that Davutoglu told this story about the London summit himself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he presumably thought it made him look strong.
Oh, absolutely. He was telling this story to a domestic audience, or maybe a sympathetic crowd, to say, look how I stood up to the British imperialists, you know? Look how I protected our interests.
But in doing that, he basically showed all the wires. He admitted the unity policy was never about what Somalis wanted. It was always about what Turkey needed.
He admitted that Somaliland's future was treated as essentially collateral damage for Turkey's strategic comfort.
So let's bring this to the present day. Why does a meeting from over a decade ago matter so much to you, the listener, now? Turkey is still the dominant external player in Somalia.
They are. I mean, they train the Gorgor Special Forces. They run the port and the airport in Mogadishu. They're even drilling for oil. Their footprint is massive. But if the entire foundation of that engagement is this cover story, it just raises serious questions about the long-term viability of the stability they claim to be building.
Because you can't build real stability on a fiction.
You can't. Somaliland isn't going away. It has been de facto independent for over 30 years now. If your entire policy is to just pretend that reality doesn't exist, or to actively suppress it to satisfy your own geopolitical anxieties, you aren't solving the conflict.
You're just pressurizing the container.
That's a good way to put it. You're putting a lid on a boiling pot and then sitting on it.
And calling it peace.
Right, and calling it peace. But eventually, the people inside that pot are going to push back.
The source ends with a pretty definitive conclusion. It says Turkey was sold to the Somali people as this altruistic partner, but it actually operated as a strategic gatekeeper.
And that's the lesson here, I think. Nations rarely act out of pure charity. We all know this. But usually they try to find a win-win where their interests can align with the people they're helping. In this case, the source argues there was a clear divergence. Ankara's interest-stopping breakaway states clashed directly with the interest of millions of people in Somaliland who want independence.
And Ankara chose Ankara. It really forces you to be a lot more skeptical when you look at these big international missions. When you see the buzzwords like Unity Conference or Stability Pact, you have to look at the map and ask, who is drawing the lines here?
You always have to ask. Unity on whose terms and stability for whom? Because in this specific case, it seems pretty clear that unity was just a diplomatic synonym for compliance.
That is a very powerful distinction to make. It changes how you read all the news coming out of the Horn of Africa.
It certainly does.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I think we're left with a much more complex and, frankly, a much more cynical picture of international aid and diplomacy. It's not just about who gives the most food or builds the best roads.
It's about who gets to define what a nation even is. And it reminds us that sometimes the friend who insists on keeping the family together is actually the one who's most afraid of what happens if everyone just starts thinking for themselves.
That is a thought to hold on to. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocation to mull over. We've talked a lot about the word unity today. In our culture, unity is almost always a positive word. We strive for it. But consider this. If a powerful nation insists on unity for a smaller nation, but has to actively suppress the voices, the votes, and the achievements of millions of people within that nation to maintain it,
Yeah.
is that truly unity? Or is it just control dressed up in its Sunday best?
That is the real question.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.